Ratifying the Constitution. By the end of this video, you should be able to define key vocabulary terms, describe the situation in the United States after the Constitutional Convention ended, list reasons why ratification was controversial, and identify the positions and main points of the people called Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Key vocabulary terms. Constitution, a written plan for government. Federalism, a system of shared power between the national and state governments. Limited government, a government whose power has defined limits. Legislature, a group that makes laws. Executive, one who administers or carries out laws. Popular sovereignty, the people's power. Amend, to change. Repeal, to cancel. After the convention, each state had to vote on whether or not it was going to ratify the Constitution, which means to make it legal and official. The votes were going to occur in special conventions, not in the state legislatures. And the reason for this was because the state legislatures had a lot of power under the Articles of Confederation, and they wouldn't be very eager to give up that power to a strong national government as designed in the Constitution. In order for the Constitution to become law, 9 out of the 13 states had to ratify it to make it legal. Now, the truth is, they really needed 13 of 13 states to ratify it, because you were never going to have a strong national government if all the states didn't agree to participate. Now, this is a tough situation because the people in the country were pretty evenly divided about ratification. About half of them thought the Constitution was a good idea, but another portion of them believed that the Constitution either was a dangerous idea or that it had some real problems. Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut all ratified the Constitution very quickly. Now, all of those states except Pennsylvania are small states, and they could see the advantage in having a national government to protect their interests. The situation in Pennsylvania was a little different. It's a large state, but they got their convention together really quickly and had a vote before the people opposed to the Constitution had a chance to organize. In the larger states, there was a lot more opposition, and bitter debate broke out in places like New York, Massachusetts, and Virginia, because those states had a lot of power and they had a lot of money and influence, and they weren't sure they wanted to give that up to a constitution. Now, the arguments over ratification were both political and personal. In some cases, people really disagreed about what the right idea was to run the country, but in other cases, the supporters of either side just really didn't like each other. And these debates were fought in newspapers, in public, and within the state conventions where they were trying to decide whether or not to vote in favor of the Constitution. Why was ratification so controversial? Well, first of all, people weren't sure that the articles were really as bad as the delegates of the Constitution believed. Were they really so weak that they needed to be replaced, or could the delegates have fixed the articles and revised them? The second question revolves around the delegates themselves, and were they justified in writing a whole new plan of government, or had they really committed an act of treason almost in throwing out the Articles of Confederation in favor of a brand new plan? The third question was, would the national government take too much power away from the states? And that was a real concern, especially of the states who were doing well under the Articles of Confederation, the larger, richer states. And finally, a lot of people asked if amendments needed to be added to the Constitution to protect individual rights. The position on ratification really broke out into about 3 sides. The first side was the Federalists, who were the supporters of the Constitution. And these were men like James Madison, no surprise, since he's considered the father of the Constitution, and it's his notes and his writing that form a lot of the text. John Jay and Alexander Hamilton, both of who strongly supported a national government with a lot of power. Now, their two main points in favor of the Constitution were, number one, the country was in danger of collapse under the Articles. They looked at events like Shays' Rebellion and believed that without a strong national government, the United States might cease to exist entirely. And secondly, that a strong national government would keep order and it would preserve the independence that so many people had fought for during the Revolutionary War. Their arguments, the Federalist arguments, were put together in something known as the Federalist Papers. It's really a collection of letters and essays they wrote in support of the Constitution. One of the most famous of those is called Federalist Paper 51, and in it James Madison wrote, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. The great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, or the people, and in the next place, oblige the government to control itself." So you see how he's trying to persuade people that government is necessary because you can't trust individual people to always do the right thing and act in the best interest of the majority. Now, on the other hand, you've got the anti-federalists, who are opponents of the Constitution. And this is a little more complicated because they kind of split into two groups. There was a group that believed that the Constitution was just the wrong plan for the United States outright. But there's a second group that some of you will be reading about in your homework who thought that if the Constitution was changed, it might not be so bad. The Anti-Federalists were led by Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, and George Clinton, who had all been supporters of the Revolutionary War. They made two main points as well. The Constitution gives too much power to the national government and thereby takes away too much power from the state governments, and the Constitution contains no guarantees of personal freedoms. It doesn't say anything about protecting the rights of individuals per se in the 7 Articles of the Constitution. There were also a lot of people who wrote about the anti-federalist position, even though their writings aren't collected in any sort of formal book like Federalist Papers. One of those was Thomas Paine, who was the author of the pamphlet Common Sense, which advocated independence back in 1776 before the Declaration was written. And he said, "Government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil." And the idea that he's expressing here is that even a good government is going to be bad in some people's views. It's going to place limits and restrictions on people. To finish this assignment, now that you've watched the video, you need to read the position that you were assigned on the paper you were given in class. You're going to highlight or underline as many different reasons to defend that position as you can, and you're going to bring your notes from this video and your highlighted position paper to class for our next activity. Thanks for listening.